Yeah. And finally, the model of deliberative democracy. The idea that the university has to be deeply embedded and engaged with publics beyond the university. That there has to be a conversation, dialogue between the university and publics. We have to think, therefore, of the public university as not a university that is accessible to all, or not only a university that is accessible to all, but we have to think of the public university as a university that has its own public sphere, and that we have to think of the university as accountable to publics, accountable to engaging with publics. And of course there have been periods in this country where that has been precisely the case. In the 1970s, the university, at least in sociology, was in fact engaging with and accountable in some ways to publics. Or so I'm told. I wasn't here. So I think that there are therefore, in this scheme, there are four models of the university. They, in a sense, exist to some extent in all places, and I am suggesting we give more emphasis to the critical and the deliberative. So, this is the reality that we face. The regulatory is becoming more and more important. And this is the reality we face. The market is becoming more and more important. The question is that we have to face, can we sustain a model of critical engagement? Can we sustain a model in which the university is a public sphere, in we discuss our role in society and we discuss the ends of society? And of course, ANPOCS is a perfect place where such critical engagement can take place, and does take place. You don't see it that way, but I see it that way, that ANPOCS is precisely such a place. But ANPOCS is not. We're in Kashambu. ANPOCS is not the deliberative democracy model. That is the idea of the university engaging with publics. That's a conversation with between, in a sense, participating, giving the university as a... Look, we live in a world where which institutions really represent the interests of people? We live in a world, if we look at all the occupations, from occupying Wall Street to Tahrir Square, Oakland, California. They got smashed in Oakland, California. I mean, I was just in Bahia, and a very interesting place for public sociology. They have a wonderful journal, as you perhaps know, Caderno, C-R-H. Caderno, all right, my Portuguese could be better. Anyway, Caderno, C-R-H, right? Wonderful dossier on precarity, clearly a public issue. There's a very deep engagement there in Bahia with the broader community. So I'm saying that, there are examples of this idea of a publicly engaged university in which the university, as I was saying, the university becomes a potential arena which can indeed represent the interests of people in a world where all these occupations, all these struggles, all these protests are in a sense anti-political parties. So this is a moment in history where the university can begin to reimagine its place in the world. And the question is whether we academics have the courage to actually move out of our protected environment, relatively protected environment, and engage and develop a new vision of a university. And I guess that's where I end. That we really need a new vision, increasingly over time, but we have an opportunity to do precisely that, so long as we still do have an autonomy from the regulatory and market models. And here in Brazil, as I say in many places in the world, you combine these four models in the most interesting and important way. You have managed to sustain a critical and a public moment to the university. And so I'm very glad to be here to actually watch it in action. Thank you very much.
Eu queria comentar duas coisas, na verdade são duas perguntas. A primeira, eu tenho reparado na minha pesquisa que talvez a universidade no Brasil seja um ambiente, eu trabalho com gênero, e talvez seja um ambiente um pouco mais igualitário em relação à profissão acadêmica nos Estados Unidos. Eu ia perguntar se você acha que isso tem alguma coisa a ver com esses modelos. Então, as grandes universidades de pesquisa nos Estados Unidos, os relatos que eu leio são de uma dificuldade em conciliar carreira e família para as mulheres muito grande. Tem muito pouca estrutura. E no Brasil, como a carreira é pública, é estável, a gente tem né, licença maternidade, algumas outras conquistas, o que o senhor acha? Se isso tem a ver com esses modelos de universidade, se seria uma hipótese que não sei, da sua observação, o que você vê em relação a isso? Essa é a primeira. A segunda, pensando na CAPES, principalmente, e nesses instrumentos de regulação da universidade no Brasil, eu pessoalmente encontro um certo dilema, que é, ao mesmo tempo em que a gente quer garantir uma autonomia universitária, a universidade de pesquisa no Brasil ela é pública. Então, existe, a sociedade toda sustenta o trabalho desses pesquisadores. Até que ponto a gente pode encontrar um modelo em que exista alguma coisa que faça o que é produzido voltar, que acho que está na discussão desses modelos que você propôs. Porque durante muito tempo no Brasil, a autonomia universitária foi sinônimo de uma bolha, onde o conhecimento ficava dentro e era só para essa elite universitária e não saía. Então, como a gente pode quebrar isso, mas também sem perder essa autonomia, né? Assim, é um dilema que eu encontro.
Minha questão é o seguinte, é uma questão mais, na verdade, de cunho pessoal, que diz respeito à sua carreira. Você falou que era um sovietologista. Segundo a sua classificação, um sovietologista seria um policy scientist, correto? Como isso, depois de 20 anos de sovietologia, quais foram a interpretação sociológica, que seja, que te levaram a, hoje em dia, exercer um papel de critical sociologist, eu acho, ou public sociologist? Ou você ainda continua sendo policy scientist? Ou foi uma mudança estrutural dentro da estrutura da academia americana que levou algumas pessoas a trocar o papel de policy scientist?
É um prazer tê-lo escutado e essa bem-humorada e crítica apresentação que nos traz um conjunto de problemas bastante substantivos. Como o senhor sabe melhor do que eu, a história da universidade no mundo sempre foi uma universidade associada à aristocracia, aos grandes poderes, e ela, pouco a pouco, ela ganha, com a Revolução Industrial, ela vai ganhando autonomia, mas, de uma certa forma, ela sempre foi muito instrumentalizada no processo histórico. E esse é um problema muito sério, porque o senhor toca num ponto que, para mim, é central para essa reflexão sobre a universidade, que é a apropriação, sobretudo depois do sistema financeiro, passou a ser o sistema que regula os demais sistemas, sobretudo com relação ao conhecimento. Não é? Nessa revolução técnico-produtiva, o grande capital, e sobretudo o capital financeiro, ele aciona o saber. Não é? Isso é muito evidente nas grandes questões e nas pequenas questões. Quando a gente vai para os fármacos, no Brasil, em que pese que o governo brasileiro tenha estabelecido algumas medidas muito importantes de distribuição de medicamento para a população que não pode pagar, que tem diabetes, que tem cardiopatias, mas eles estão tomando medicamentos de 50 anos atrás. A pipeline, o patenteamento faz com que quem consuma os medicamentos high-tech somos nós, classe média, e os ricos, a população afluente. Então, a minha questão, eu sei que é uma questão complicada, difícil, mas, quer dizer, e eu acho que no Brasil, eu acompanho o seu raciocínio, eu acho que nós estamos entrando, quer dizer, numa procura, digamos, de um rigor positivista. A universidade brasileira está criando, isso é uma interpretação muito particular, está criando seus próprios problemas e está se descolando da sociedade. Eu sei que esse é um movimento histórico, de idas e vindas, que nem todas as forças vão nessa direção. Mas há, no meu entender, uma articulação, como o senhor apresentou aí. Quer dizer, e isso, a meu juízo, tem uma vinculação direta com a grande finança e o objetivo, não é, da busca da inovação, para a venda da inovação, para a apropriação, para o grande capital. Muito obrigado. É mais que o senhor pudesse explorar isso, essa inquietação. Muito obrigado.
Yeah, those are all, I mean, the questions you raise are all big questions, but I think they do arise out of the framework I've offered. The first question about autonomy of the university and internal democratization, I think it is somewhat of a paradox, an interesting one. I mean, my vision, my understanding of at least of the federal universities, and having spent a little bit of time at USP, is that I get the impression that the universities here are internally more democratic. I mean, in the United States, we don't, I don't know anywhere else, perhaps in Latin America, but where we actually vote who should be the rector. And students, even though they don't have a vote, they seem to feel that they have an influence to bear, and they are very willing to strike and to engage in struggles to defend their rights in a way that I have not seen elsewhere. So the paradox is that this struggle for internal democracy may be at the expense of engagement with publics. To the extent that there is internal democracy, and I underline may be actually, and insofar as it is concerned with creating an autonomous university, may be at odds with engagement with publics. However, the fact is that in this country, I think that the internal democracy, to the extent that there is, has actually gone along with, has coincided with development of engagement. That in fact the participation in the university has been carried out. So from outside, the universities here look much more engaged than the universities, at least in the north. I see the parallels. I spend a lot of time in South Africa, and the universities in South Africa have a similar history of engagement and are facing similar problems to the ones that you face here. Now, you specifically talked about the gender relations. I don't know the details I don't have a conception, except of course there seem to be many women here at ANPOCS. But yes, in the United States we have developed all sorts of policies that actually give some sort of recognition to the situation of women, particularly when it comes to maternity leave. But the result is the same, that the men are dominant for the most part. It's women climb so far, and there are huge debates as to why this is the case. So I don't want to, that's dangerous territory. The person who asked me about Sovietology. Yes, I was, when I said, this is a problem of language, when I said that I was a Sovietologist, I was joking. I did study the Soviet Union. Well, I studied Hungary, actually, during the 1980s. I was a factory worker, not a Sovietologist. So I worked in factories in Hungary, and then then after I worked in factories for 10 years, Hungary collapsed. They blame me. The socialist system collapsed, and then I moved to the Soviet Union, and within 1 year the Soviet Union collapsed. They blame me again. I don't know what's going to happen here. But the point is that I was very critical of the Sovietologists. I came in as a Marxist. I've always been a Marxist. I was born a Marxist in Africa. And so I became a Marxist critic of Soviet society. and very different from a Sovietologist. Well, yes, that's an interesting question. I wish it were. The fact of the matter is that my position, which was against marketization, against the transition to the market as it was formulated in shock therapy, that everybody in what was the Soviet Union, Russia, and in the United States, where the economists dominate, they all said the market is the solution, the market is the solution, the market is the solution, the market is the solution. I said, and there were two variants of that. There was the revolutionary move. You have to do it quick, shock therapy, big bang. And the only way to make that transition to the market is to do it quickly. The other said, no, you've got to build up institutions, evolutionary road. So there was the revolutionary vision and the evolutionary one. I said, no, not revolution, not evolution, involution. That as a result of market processes, the economy will go into decline. And indeed, for the 90s, the Soviet economy, well, Russian economy, declined as we've never seen an economy decline. So I was very critical, but nobody ever believed me. I was a sociologist. Nobody cares what a sociologist says. I was a factory worker. I mean, that's not science. I mean, so my critiques, yeah, that was the absence of a sort of public sphere in which one can engage in these debates made it very difficult. So I was just a lone critical sociologist. Yes, that's right. Okay. Yeah, but I was right, by the way. We wrote a book called The Radiant Past. It was about Hungary. Hungary's road to capitalism. Ideology and practice on Hungary's. And of course, the radiant past. The workers today in Hungary, they think that socialism is great. The past. Because they're all unemployed. There's marginalization, precarity. Same in the Soviet Russia, post-Soviet Russia. So I think, I mean, they thought they were getting out of prison, right? Leaving the Soviet world, getting out of prison. But they actually were getting out of prison, but entering a new prison, the market prison. They thought that the market would be a solution to all problems. And they were not ready to hear the critique of the market. You know why they were not ready to listen to the critique of the market? Because Soviet ideology had always been critical of capitalism. And they didn't believe any of that ideology. It was ideology. So I think that now, I think that the sorts of analysis I made 20 years ago are now, in a sense, becoming more acceptable. And so they invite me back to Hungary to talk. Okay, all right, that's a long story, I'm sorry. Yes, the question of, well, what you're talking about, in a sense, is indeed the commodification of knowledge and the question of property rights. In the United States, there was a very crucial legislation passed in 1981 called the Bayh-Dole Act, which basically allowed the universities to actually capitalize on the innovations they made, put money in their pockets. So, what this did, it encouraged universities to actually seek collaborative relationships with industry. Until that point, the universities and the country at large said, look, you know, what is produced in the universities is for everybody. Open access, public knowledge. We should all have access to that knowledge. And then suddenly it's changed. It becomes privatized with this legislation. And so, in fact, corporations come to establish closer relationships with universities. My own university struck a $500 million agreement with British Petroleum for research into non-fossil fuels. So universities are cashing in, some of them who have well-known scientists cashing in on this. The result is the state says, aha, you can get money from industry? Well, we're not going to give you any money. So they withdraw state funds. So then the university is forced to go for private funds or increase fees. So the state says, no, we're going to give you less. So it's a spiral process of privatization. So that is indeed, that's the bigger picture, I think, of what you're talking about around pharmaceutical companies, because they are, of course, the worst. Well, amongst the worst. The money that they make on innovation, of course, they are quick to establish relations with universities. And then you get all sorts of problematic, shall we say, problematic relationships between the university and companies. So that university research scientists conduct experiments that actually favor the drugs of the company for who's paying them. So there's a real problem of actually of distortion of interests. So that is of course we in the social scientists don't see a lot of that. And you know, it's interesting that I think as one of you said that we academics have dug our own grave. I mean, who has brought third wave marketization? Who has brought third wave marketization? The economists? Academics? They're the ones in the United States who have justified and legitimated neoliberal strategies. Some of them, in the United States, they are by far the most dominant. In Latin America, of course, you have institutional economists who are contesting that. But in the United States, there is increasingly, I mean, they have played the crucial role in the university justifying the destruction of the university. And that model is then exported. So, I think, are any economists here? No. Okay.